David, I think it was a noble gesture of setting up a dive-in movie at the local community pool, but I don't think it was a good idea to show Jaws to the kids the night before their first swimming lessons.
It was Jaws.
You know what happens to the shark at the end of that movie, right?
Stalika, we're on the air, John. Yeah. We're on the air, David. Come on. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Hoops HD. This is our bracket rundown show. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by I got John Stalika over there, who is helping David scare off kids. Matt Sikorsky on my other side. Down below, David Griggs, who
I'm right down here.
And John Titel as well. This is our bracket rundown show, and on these shows, we put together a bracket. In the past, what we've been doing is putting together a seed list. We decided to switch things up a little bit this week, David. Can you fill in people what we're doing this week? Do you even know?
No, okay. But I think like you asked for my top 60 teams, and I guess you're just going to bracket those right as I gave them to you.
No, what I actually did was I asked each of our panelists.
That would be a better show.
I asked each of our panelists to provide me with their top 50 teams. That is ranked 1 through 50. Every team in the nation, regardless of conferences. David gave me 60 teams because he doesn't know how to count to 50, apparently. But everybody else gave me 50 teams. What we did was I went and got a cross-country score of them all and came up with a consensus bracket through the end of the at-larges. I kind of went on my own and filled in the auto bids below that. And what we are going to do tonight is reveal this consensus Hoops HD bracket right here live on the air that nobody other than possibly myself has seen the results to. So it's a big lot of anticipation here.
Unveiling.
But I'm going to start by showing the blank bracket here, and there it is, completely blank. And,
all right. Nice job, Joe.
You like that? I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm going to do is, for the first few seed lines, I want to do one team at a time and have a little bit of discussion as we go through each seed line about what you see here, whether you agree with it, and whether you think that the consensus was just way off from where you personally would have the teams. And just as a note, this was mostly as of the end of the day, Wednesday. So the games here on Thursday did not count, including the Wisconsin-Michigan game that we just saw go final, and the games that are going on as we record this. But number one overall, Matt, any surprise it was Villanova?
I guess not. I mean, I personally had Gonzaga, but I'm hard to complain. If it's not Gonzaga, Villanova is a good call.
Right. And as you can see here, we'll also be revealing where the teams are going. Obviously, Gonzaga would go to New York City and go to Buffalo for the first 2 rounds. Number 2 overall was Gonzaga. John T., do you agree that the Zags are number 2, or do you think that, like Matt, they should have been number 1?
I'd say coin flip for number 1. I like them at number 2. That being said, I think they are in the most precarious position due to their strength of schedule, in that I think if Villanova suffers one loss in the weeks ahead, they might still be a number 1. If Gonzaga suffers a loss, even if it's to a St. Mary's team, I could easily see them sliding down to the 2 line.
Okay, well, and Stalika, number 3 was Kansas. I don't know if there's been any big shocks so far, have there?
No, but I guess had Kansas not been able to come back against West Virginia on Monday night, it would have been a different story.
Yeah, that was a crazy comeback.
They had quite a week. They sweated out Texas Tech in the game before that. But they got the wins.
Right. And David, let me do you here as I finish off the one line. It is Baylor, who did suffer the loss during the past week, but does still remain on the one line here.
Yeah, and they did lose, but that's the thing. It wasn't that bad of a loss, and it didn't erase all of the good on their profile. To be honest, just the way they're going, I don't think Baylor will be up there at the end. But if we're doing it as if today were Selection Sunday, they still got the strongest paper. There's a team that's playing really well that I think will ultimately overtake them. But
well, Baylor is hosting Kansas coming up on Saturday. If they win that game, you may want to change your tune on that, though.
Look at who North Carolina has between now and the end. And if they can run through that, I think they're going to pass Baylor.
Well, I think it was a consensus between all of us on these 4 teams. Maybe the order was a little bit different, but all 5 of us did agree that these were the top 4 teams. Our colleague Lee Del Vecchio did submit a bracket, did submit a list. He submitted it too late to be factored in, luckily, because he felt Louisville deserved to be on the top line. Does anybody I'll throw this open to any of you. Anyone want to make Lee's case that Louisville belonged on the top line?
I might be willing to make that case in a couple of weeks. I'm not quite now. Even for the simple fact Baylor just beat Louisville head-to-head earlier this year on a neutral. That, Louisville probably gapped that game away, but they still lost. So, and I don't think they've done so much more that you could then overtake them.
Well,
It's a shame that North Carolina didn't have Florida State's resume, because if they had the wins that the Seminoles did, they'd probably be a lock number 1 overall themselves.
They may by the time it's over, though. I mean, look, they have a back-loaded schedule, and if they can win those games, they're going to have an amazing profile.
Well, let's go down. I'm sorry, David. Go ahead.
Well, I'm starting to think North Carolina's program is pretty good.
Just one quick note here. You can see that the way it's set up, the first column would be playing the fourth column there. So in the national semifinals will be East versus the South. That's in the bottom left corner here. But let's go ahead and reveal the number 5 team overall was that North Carolina team. And David, this is a team that you think is on the verge of catching Baylor here.
Yeah, I do. 2 reasons. Now, I realize if Baylor beats Kansas, that's a big win for the moment, and I'm not even saying it's going to happen. It's just by the time when you look at North Carolina, how they're playing now, how backloaded their schedule is, and with the conference tournament obviously coming up after that, when it's all over, I think they'll be up there ahead of Baylor. But for now, I agree exactly with the 5 teams we've had, almost in the same order.
Our number 6 overall team was Lee Delvecchio's Louisville Cardinals, and that is already back-to-back ACC teams after back-to-back Big 12 teams. And Titel, do you think that Louisville really is here on the verge of a 1 seed, or?
On the verge, sure, but it would require them to win the ACC conference tourney and perhaps the regular season. My first stat of the night, Louisville as a number 2 seed has played 11 times. How many times have they lost as a number 2 seed, anyone?
7?
They have never lost as a 2 seed. They are 11-0.
Wow.
Oh,
Really?
I thought they were a 2 seed 11 different times. Oh, damn.
Oh, yeah, I guess. So they won the national title twice as a 2 seed. I was confused, but I forgot the tournament has not always been 64 teams.
Correct.
Yeah.
Here's another stat was that Pac-12 teams, I believe, have 1 win in the regional semifinals or finals ever when they come out of any region other than the West region. And therefore, I think it could end up being a big decision here what Pac-12 team comes out of the West, and that's kind of leads into my – actually, it doesn't quite lead into my reveal this.
That is trivia, Chad.
It will lead into my reveal on the 8th seed because Pac-12 teams are much more successful in the West region than any other region. But before we get there, another ACC team, Florida State. And Salika, Florida State, you agree with that?
I did tease it a little bit earlier. I thought Florida State should actually be a couple spots higher based on what they've actually been able to accomplish on the floor. I mean, if you look at some of their biggest wins this year, going to Virginia, getting a win, and recently they've also beaten Miami on the road. They've beaten Louisville, Duke, Notre Dame. I mean, there's a few losses that probably keep them off the 1 line, including Temple as the most notable, and Georgia Tech.
Well, let me go ahead, and I was teasing it here, and I jumped the gun a little bit. Arizona gets the last 2 seed as a top Pac-12 team, and I'm going to notice we go through here a couple of teams that there was a large discrepancy between here. Matt, you had Arizona all the way down at 13th overall on your list, which was which was down to the 4 seed range. You want to tell us why?
They're not great. I don't think they're that great in the metrics and resume-wise. The one impressive win they basically have is that win at UCLA, which it's a very impressive win, but I like what a lot of the other ACC teams have done more. I like what, say, West Virginia out of the Big 12's done more. And I actually much prefer their Pac-12 camaraderie Oregon. Like, I think Oregon's done a little more, and including beating Arizona by a gazillion. and I like Oregon better as a team.
And again, one of the reasons I was bringing up the Arizona being in the West region is that the first four teams from conferences, if they're among the top 4 seed lines, have to be in different regions. So that would mean a team like an Oregon or a UCLA cannot be in the West region if Arizona ends up being the top. But Tytel, I'm going to show here another screen we have here where I can pull up some team comparisons, actually. And I want to ask you, do you want to defend your Arizona Wildcats versus a team like Oregon?
I want to, but as Matt said, I saw them. We went to Eugene and we're down 38-11 in the first half. It's hard for me to say that Arizona is better than Oregon.
Okay, so you would actually had Oregon above them.
Yeah, but they did. I mean, they played them even after that. They only lost by 27.
Well, here, let me go ahead and pull up a screen here with the Arizona profile, because I think this is an interesting debate to have, this Arizona versus Oregon debate, and maybe if it'll come up here. And David, what Arizona has is, other than at Oregon, the other 3 best teams in the Pac-12, they've beat all 3 of them on the road, at Cal, at USC, at UCLA. And
that was the tipping point for me. Oregon, as good as they are, they're not as good on the road as Arizona is. Albeit Arizona had a little trouble on the road the night they played Oregon. But the tipping point for me was exactly that, what you just said. That's why I have them ahead of Oregon, not by much.
And I should be able to get that Oregon profile up here as well. And Matt, I know that you look more at the metrics and everything, but what you're missing in Oregon is the road wins. At USC is the only win against a tournament caliber team they got on the road.
Yeah, they beat Tennessee at a neutral. Who?
That's not Tennessee was 1 game over 500. Come on.
I don't think Tennessee and Cal are all that different, or
other than a huge difference in record.
I mean, Cal is not quite as good as they were last year, but that's still a win that Arizona got on the road that's pretty nice. I mean, the only other team that won at Cal, if I'm not mistaken, was Virginia, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah, and we're not looking at these teams yet as being in the field, but there's your difference between Tennessee and Cal, Matt. 14-12 versus 18-7. I think that's a pretty big difference, isn't it?
I think Tennessee's playing a much stronger schedule.
Cal still has the number 39 strength of schedule in the nation. That's not bad strength of schedule. Come on.
Has Cal beaten a team remotely as good as Kentucky yet?
No, they beat USC. All right, let's keep going on here. Let's take a look at the 3 seeds and start with the number 9 overall team, and that is the Oregon Ducks. I don't think it's much of a surprise there, given the debate we just had. Beyond them at number 10 overall is Duke. And John T., let me ask you about this Duke team. They just came off of a huge win over Virginia last night. How far, what's the ceiling on this Duke team? Are they move? I think they're one of the fastest risers out there, aren't they?
Definitely. The ceiling is a 1 seed. I think it's in play, which had you asked me a month ago when they were losing to NC State, I would have said you're crazy. But I think even a week, 10 days ago, this was like 5 seed territory. And now I think most people would agree that 3 seed is a legitimate. And it's one thing to have everyone healthy and Coach K there and everything, but to have Jason Tatum playing like a 4th-year senior instead of a freshman who's played 20 games, the ceiling is really high just because I don't know what the ceiling is for the freshman.
All right. And Stalika, over at number 11 overall on the 3 line here is Matt's West Virginia team that he wanted way up higher than this. Do you think that they are here on the 3 line? Do you think that's where they belong?
As for West Virginia, this is actually the spot where I would have had them on my own seed list. I mean, they probably could have made a case for going up to the 2 line had they been able to sweep Kansas earlier, but they're still going to be
more than a case.
I mean, they're still going to be in their, I guess you could say, their natural site, considering they're going to be shipped out to Buffalo.
Yeah. David, let me finish off the 3 line with you here for any other further comments on it. It is Virginia does hold on to a 3 seed despite having lost, I think, 4 out of 6 now.
Yeah, 4 out of 6, and it could quickly become 5 out of 7. Now, they're playing really good teams, and they're not losing by much, but I overvalued them. I thought they were a 1 seed, and when you're a 1 seed, you win those games that are that hard to win. I still think they're really good. I still think they can go far, but I don't think they should be any higher than this. In fact, if I recall, I don't even think I had them quite this high.
Yeah,
but it is a good pro.
I was going to pull up that Virginia schedule for you here because here we go with those 4 out of 6 losses. The Syracuse one being obviously the one really bad one on there.
Yeah, bad by protected seed standards. It's not bad by tournament standards.
Well, it was the worst loss of the season.
Right, yeah.
Matt, you want to make a comment on them?
Yeah, I think I almost had Virginia here by default, in that, like, there's a team we haven't mentioned, Kentucky, but, like, I don't have a huge deal of Virginia being ahead of Kentucky. And then I would have had Florida in this range, but I think they're a different team without John and Bunu, and I dropped him a seed line because of his injury.
And that's interesting. We'll get that if you want to get to Florida in a second here. But Buno is out for the season, I believe. Correct?
Yeah. So that's probably why I was maybe having Florida in this range. I had Virginia instead.
All right. Number 13 overall, the 4 seed there in the South region is UCLA, and Titel, there is your third Pac-12 team. So for the Pac-12, maybe being only a 4-bid league, 3 of them are real good teams.
They might only be a 3-bid league. Let's not throw Cal in there already.
I was going to say USC.
Yeah, sorry. I wasn't sure if you were thinking. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's also going to change in terms of, I assume that the winner of the Pac-12 tourney is going to have to beat one of these teams in the semis and the other in the final. And when you have 2 top 10 caliber wins on your resume, that's enough to bump you up 1 or 2 seeds, I think.
Yeah, and again, that could bring it into play. Which of these 3 teams here, Arizona, Oregon, and UCLA, gets to go to San Jose for the regional,
right,
as opposed to having to fly cross country.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also going to give an incentive for winning the Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas if it does come down to a close race between, let's say, Arizona and Oregon.
Kentucky does get in on the 4 line here as the 14 overall team. David gets to go to Milwaukee and then Kansas City, so not that bad of a penalty for Kentucky despite falling to the 4 line.
No, basically their profile is the neutral floor win over North Carolina. By protected seed standards, they haven't done a whole lot other than that. I mean, they've done some things, but nothing that really jumps out at you. I think we got Kentucky right where they belong.
All right. And Stalika, over here, there is that Florida team that Matt was just discussing with the Buno out, still in the protected seed range, but actually fell below Kentucky, right below Kentucky, but below Kentucky despite having beaten Kentucky head-to-head badly.
Yeah, I had spent a couple days on the road, so that's why I was, in a manner, speaking on the show on Wednesday. So I did not get the note on Florida's injury situation until Matt had just pointed it out, because I would have had Florida number 14 and Kentucky number 15 on my seed line.
All right, and I'll go ahead and finish out the 4 seeds. These are the protected seeds. The last team that does make it is Butler. Titel, what do you think about the 4 line here overall?
A lot of amazing history with UCLA, Kentucky, and Florida, and some recent history of almost making it in Butler. A quick stat about Florida: as an auto bid as opposed to an at-large team, 17-2 in the tourney. So I don't know if they're going to win that SEC tourney. I think they're right there with Kentucky, obviously, but talk about incentive to win that SEC tourney.
And talk about, when you look at the regions that we put together here, obviously this is just our current bracket, but how about that Midwest region with Kansas, Kentucky, Louisville, and Oregon? That's probably the region of death right there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that one.
And if you look at it, though, you look at that, the Midwest and the South look like a lot more difficult regions, but that should be the way it is when you've got the 3 and the 4 seeds there, and the 1 and the 2 seeds should get the easier regions. I think that it kind of did play out the way it should, at least in my opinion.
I agree. And some fun Sweet 16 potential matchups if this holds serve. I don't think Florida will be up there in the end. I just don't know if they can compensate for the injury. But the team I would have told you 2 hours ago that I thought would be up there didn't look like they would be up there after tonight.
Well, Bronson Koenig did not play tonight also for Wisconsin. So well,
Yeah.
what do you do with a loss like this that we just saw Wisconsin have tonight to Michigan without one of their best players?
So you calculate the different factors. 1, you lost. 2, you only lost by single digits. 3, you lost on the road. 4, you lost to what I think is now a turning team. I think Michigan is not solidly in, but I think they're in as of right now. And 5, I mean, Koenig is hurt, and he's could have made the difference in a single-digit game. I know that's a lot to process. I don't know how it all spits out of the computer or the human element, but it's not as simple as a win and loss because there's a lot of factors going into it.
Matt, you would have actually had somebody else above Wisconsin from the Big Ten?
Yes, I would have had Purdue. I had Purdue at 16 on my list. And I think I've liked what they've done on the whole a little better. I think they're playing a little better. And I liked them just ahead. Butler 17, but I liked them just ahead of Butler.
Now they're there. I mean, they've got the same record right now as Wisconsin. This is currently after the Wisconsin loss, but you actually like Purdue better than even before Wisconsin lost to Michigan. And I guess I'm not quite fully seeing it. But David, you had a comment?
I had them pretty close. I might like them better now.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and since we haven't seen either of those teams show up, what I'm going to do is from here on out, after the top 4 lines, I'm going to do a full seed line at a time here, so we can get all of the 5 seeds showing up at once. And there they are. We do see both Wisconsin and Purdue in there, along with Cincinnati and Creighton. Salika, any surprises there on the 5 line for you?
Not so far. I mean, we're also going to be keeping an eye on Creighton, depending on how their team does in the post-Watson era. But so far, they've pretty much held the ship together with the win at Butler starting to loom a little bit bigger, although losing a game at Seton Hall, not entirely advisable, but it is understandable considering that Seton Hall is pretty much a desperate team at this point, just trying to get into the field, period.
Well, John T., do you agree with that this Creighton team, despite the Seton Hall loss, still belongs up here on the 5 line, even without Mo Watson?
Hanging by a thread. When you lose to Seton Hall, who's looking bubblicious, it really speaks volumes about your team. I know that they're a completely different team without their point guard, and they shouldn't get penalized for his injury, but they shouldn't be rewarded for losing games. So I think for now it's fine, but I see this team slipping in the weeks ahead.
David, what about Cincinnati over here?
Well, I like them. I mean, I would have liked them a lot more had they gotten the win at SMU, but I might not have them quite this high, but I have them really close. And one of the things they have that's looking better and better is that win at Iowa State. Their record is really bloated. They've had limited opportunities, but for the most part, with the exception of at SMU and Butler, they've taken advantage of what few opportunities they've had. So you have to measure them based on what's there, and I think that it's fair to have them there.
I think I'm also hearing some screams from the message boards because Kentucky having to go out to Milwaukee. Ouch.
Yep.
Not far. Hey.
But Wisconsin
against Wisconsin?
A potential second-round matchup with Kentucky playing Wisconsin at Milwaukee. Matt, you think we have a mistake here on this line?
Yeah, I would have Notre Dame up here. I guess I've been higher on them than the rest of the panel the last few weeks, but I like them better than Creighton. I think I had Cincy on the 5 line, but I had ND ahead of them on my S-curve, so I would have liked ND, especially after this last week they had where they drummed Florida State. It'd beat a solid Wake team. I would have them up on the 5 line.
Let me go ahead here and let's see what the 6th line is and see if Notre Dame did get on there. And yes, there they are in Indianapolis, playing Virginia and Indianapolis. Some more screams from Virginia fans having to play Notre Dame and Indy. SMU, South Carolina, and Maryland. Dave, let me actually start with you on this SMU team here. You and Matt kind of got into it in some emails earlier this week about where SMU belongs. Do you think they are a 6 seed caliber team?
No, I personally don't, because it seems like their best win was the home win against Cincinnati, what they just got. Their only really true road win of note, I would say, is against Memphis, who, while not an NCAA tournament team, is good at home. And when I say that, I'm not meaning that as a backhanded compliment. I did think it was an impressive win. I know TCU has a good RPI, but they beat TCU at home, and TCU's only won 2 true road games, so I give them less credit for that than I do for the win at Memphis. And when I look at teams that aren't in the field yet, Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, they've all beaten not just NIT teams, but NCAA tournament teams that will undoubtedly be in our field, multiple teams away from home. And I just think that, like Cincinnati, SMU has had limited chances, but unlike Cincinnati, they haven't taken advantage of them.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't have them up there this high.
There's an SMU
there's the
profile
profile.
there,
Yeah,
right there on the screen. Best road win is at Temple. Best neutral court win, Pittsburgh.
Well, Temple's – I mean, I know Temple's probably better RPI-wise. I think the win at Memphis is better than the win at Temple. But to your point, they don't really have anything that strong.
Titel, we also have Maryland and South Carolina on this line. Do you agree with this line?
I like it a lot. I mean, Maryland certainly looked good against Northwestern the other night. South Carolina's been up and down for a few weeks. As much as I don't love SMU, like, you can't argue with the fact that they've been pretty dominant for 2 months in a row now. So, yeah, I think it's a good line.
And Stalika, South Carolina has lost home games to Alabama and Arkansas in the last week. This team starting to go the wrong direction now.
I mean, it certainly precludes them from getting up to the 5 line, but I mean, it does in some ways parallel their end of the season slide from last year. Although this year, at least they're beating Mississippi State, at least they're beating Missouri. I mean, they're not losing the awful games, but I guess losing to more desperate teams like Alabama and Arkansas at this point. But I think there's still more than enough good on their profile to offset that, especially considering when we get to the number 7 line here shortly.
All right, well, that's a good lead into the 7 line. Let's go ahead and reveal it. We see Minnesota, St. Mary's, Iowa State, and Xavier. And Matt, first of all, it's good that Lee Del Vecchio was not with us because he wanted Xavier on the 3 line. But let's talk about serious stuff, though. Are you okay with this line, or do you have a problem with it? David, I know you do. So.
I might call out David's point. I think Xavier is a little high here. I would have had Oklahoma State on this line instead of Xavier. I probably might have had USC instead of Xavier. And I think St. Mary's and Iowa State are solid. I think I had Minnesota right on the border here between 7 and 8. So having them as a 7 isn't that bad. But no, Xavier feels a little high. I know they've basically not had Trayvon Blewett these last 2 games and probably won't have him this Saturday in a huge game for Marquette. But I still think it's probably a little high given that they don't have a ton on their profile anyway.
Well, if you look at across the board here, the metrics, Matt, Xavier versus Oklahoma State, the 2 teams you're just discussing, are fairly even almost across the board, other than that Xavier's done a lot better in their conference.
Matt or me?
Well, David, why don't you respond?
Well, okay, yeah, they're fairly even, but here's where they're not even. Oklahoma State won a monster road game, and Xavier has won a couple of road games.
I'll go ahead and pull up that Oklahoma State profile.
Winning at Wichita. Now, I know it wasn't in the Roundhouse, but it was still in Wichita. And then getting the other win at West Virginia. And then another nice – I'd say that win at TCU. TCU's kind of a home court hero. That's probably as good or better than Xavier's best win. So when it comes to the quality of Oklahoma State's wins, I know the metrics are close, but it's not even close.
It was post-Watson, but still winning at Creighton is still going to carry some weight with the committee, though.
Yeah, here's a Xavier profile. And Titel, do you want to chip in on this argument here, whether Xavier belongs here or we should have gone with someone like Oklahoma State?
No, I'm going to focus on Arizona making a huge 3 at the halftime buzzer to go up 10 over Washington State. I'll leave the rest to you guys.
Okay.
Arizona getting it done against Wazoo, one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the state of Washington.
But since Joby's not here, let me also go back to one of his analogies from earlier in this year. Is Xavier throwing a life raft to a team like Providence, who's starting to make a little run of their own of late?
Oh, boy.
What about we've got Minnesota and St. Mary's on this line also. Titel, what about the two of those teams? Do you have a?
Yeah, I think that they're both in trouble. Minnesota is solid but young, and I think that even though Richard Pitino can ask Rick Pitino about his ACC fellow conference member Florida State, that there's just too much size for the Seminoles. And St. Mary's, I know they can beat everybody besides Gonzaga, but Arizona has had good luck in the tournament out west, so I think that the Wildcats are looking pretty good against the Gales.
All right, let's go ahead and reveal the 8 line. There is that Oklahoma State team we just discussed, along with USC, Vatech, and Northwestern.
Oh, damn. No.
What's wrong, David?
No. Well, I mean, you can't have USC. You have to start looking beyond the metrics, beyond the paper. And just the other night, you have to look at how good Missouri played. And you got to consider putting them in the Midwest.
All right. That's
Funny,
it.
David, you're always talking about bloated records for a team like Maryland. I mean, what's USC?
Matt,
Well, yeah.
on a more serious note, Northwestern here, after winning at Wisconsin, did not look very good last night.
No, they, other than the Wisconsin game, have not played well recently, but I think they miss Scotty Lindsey, and they're not at the point in their program that where they can afford to miss a leading score for this much time and do all that well without him.
Yeah. And Salika, a team that's trending up at the moment, I guess, is this Vatech team.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is starting to trend up after their double overtime win against Virginia, and
They've got,
unlike Virginia, actually winning at Pittsburgh, which is the Panthers have started to get a little hot themselves, but probably going to be too late for them to really merit at-large discussion. But I also want to bring up Oklahoma State because I thought that was a team that probably could have snuck up to the 7 line because they've actually been red hot during the, shall we say, the second third of Big 12 play.
yeah.
David,
Virginia Tech's dealing with injuries, aren't they? They're without
Chris Clark.
Yeah.
It's done for the year.
Let's go ahead, though, and let me go ahead and reveal the 9 line. We're actually going to get some potential matchups here according to our bracket. And Titel, we see here Wichita State, Michigan State, Miami, and Dayton. Do you agree?
I feel so bad for Northwestern. They've waited 1,000 years to make it to the tourney. They got to play the Shockers, who, as Arizona fans found out the hard way about 11 months ago, you do not mess around with the Shockers in the tourney. So hopefully not a one and done for the Wildcats. But as my Wildcats lost to Wichita State last year, I see the same thing happening this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't fathom that.
We can't swap Wichita State and Miami, can we? Because I'm also looking at a couple other potential second-round matchups.
Yeah, but let's, Matt, I want to discuss this Wichita State team again. You look at these predictive ratings that you're a big fan of. 13 in the KenPom right now, 16 in the Sagar, and 19 in the BPI. They should be one of Lee Del Vecchio's 4 seeds, shouldn't they?
Man, they're playing like it now, but, I have them right here on the 9 line. I think this is about the highest. You could climb one more line before the end of the year, but just because there's so little on their resume, it's hard seeing them get anything above the 8-9 game. But man, I would hate to see them be the 1 seed that sees them in my region. I'll say that.
Yeah, and as Salika pointed out, according to what we're showing right here, there's a shot that Wichita State could end up at a 9 seed with Kansas again, David.
Yeah, I mean that would be fun. And I would enjoy that. I don't understand this Miami pick. I know they had a big win earlier in the year against Akron, but other than that, they've just done absolutely nothing. That's their only top 100 win, and they're just 3-10 in Mid-American Conference play.
I actually wanted to address this Miami pick. This was one of those teams that there was a big discrepancy between. John T., you actually had them all the way down to 39 on your seed list, which would have been a line or two below this. Do you want to argue why they don't belong there?
So Miami gets a ton of credit for beating the Tar Heels, and as we said, since Vatek is trending upward, they get some credit for that. The non-conference schedule was weak at best, and some of the losses were by a gazillion points. Granted, they have a very hard schedule, both in conference play as well as against the in-state rival like Florida. I think I can live with them on the 9 line, but I could easily see them falling 1 or 2 more.
So let me get this straight. John T has Miami 39. I have Miami 38 overall. Which one of you guys is voting Miami higher than me? Or was that another Lee Del Vecchio pick?
That would be me, actually. I love the way this Miami team is playing right now. I know they lost the Louisville game, but it was only by 5 points. Nice win over Vatek. They beat North Carolina just a couple weeks ago. Matt, you had a comment on them too?
I had them up on this 9 line too, because for nothing else, they're playing pretty well, and every team below this has stumbled recently. So a close loss at Louisville, where they led most of the way, far outperformed these other teams, and that's simply how I had them at the 9 line right now.
I think they're
this range is permanent, but for today,
I think their profile is going to improve. I think they're going to be in the top half of the bracket based on how they're playing.
Well, here's that remaining schedule. They have at Virginia, Duke, at Vatek, at Florida State after a home game with Clemson. So they definitely have a shot to move up there. But they
if they win all of those, I think they're going to move up.
Yeah.
They're movable, Todd, yeah.
We don't have a conflict here, do we, Chad? I mean, aren't Virginia Tech and Dayton both Atlantic 10 rivals?
Still think Missouri in the Midwest.
I'm going to go ahead and pull up the 10 seeds, and this is where we really get start getting into the trash that's starting to come into the bracket. I think at this point, almost all the way through the 9 line, it looks fairly solid at this point, other than maybe Michigan State. But on the 10 line here, Kansas State, Michigan, VCU, and Seton Hall. Who wants to throw up first? Tytel, let me start with you. I don't think any of these teams really belong in the tournament, but there they all are.
So I'll defer to Stalika. I assume Xavier wants no part of VCU, even post-Shaka Smart era. And I'm going to have to pull up the history book. I believe the Iowa State-Michigan game is the Coach Johnny Orr special, if somebody can back me up on that.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yeah.
But as far as these teams themselves go, I mean, Matt, let me turn to you here. Are any of them playing well right now? I guess Michigan is the one that's playing well right now.
Yeah, Michigan's playing well. These other ones I'm really rooting for VCU to get exposed to during their rough 3-game stretch starting tomorrow night at Richmond. K-State, they should be doing better. They're a fairly experienced team, and yet they're fading again. And Hall's the one you basically know what they are. They're a decent little team. They don't have a point guard, so they can't be much better than this, but they do play their ass off every night. And
David, let's address Bruce Weber's team here. I'm going to pull their profile up because take a look at what they've done the last couple of weeks. Yes, they won at Baylor, but what did they do the 3 games before and the 3 games after that?
Well, they struggled a little bit.
Well, Tytel, I mean,
yeah,
if it wasn't for the Baylor win, we're not even talking Kansas State, are we?
No, we are not.
Okay. I think that this team is heading right back out of the tournament, which is where I thought they belonged in, because I don't think one win can carry you when you've that's really all they've got.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that it played out this way, in that they ended up, because I think it would have been great had they won at Kansas and at Baylor and then somehow missed the field.
But I think it also bears repeating that this result came in before tonight's game between Michigan and Wisconsin. So I would have actually moved the Wolverines up to my final 9 seed based on that result.
Let's talk about 9 seeds, actually. VCU, there was a big discrepancy here. Matt, I don't think you even had them in your field. You had them 48th overall, which probably would not have made your field. John T., you had them at 32 overall, which would have been an 8 seed. Let me start you with your Tytel. Do you want to tell Matt where he's gone wrong with this VCU team?
I don't, because he's a nice guy, but I also think that the season's not over yet. VCU travels to Dayton on March 1st, and I assume everybody predicts that they're going to meet again in the A-10 tourney game. So while it's nice to guess where they are today, I think that we could easily see them shift because they still play each other once and probably twice in the weeks ahead.
Right. Matt, do you want to tell us why VCU does not belong in the field?
They haven't beaten all that many decent teams, and in my mind, they basically lost those St. Bonaventure and GW games. It's like, how lucky can you be to have like two incredibly crazy things? Like, and I think their quality will be exposed. So like, I might be projecting with them a little bit, but like in 2 weeks from now, I think they'll be much closer to 48 than 32.
All right, I got to take issue with you here. I know the St. Bonaventure game and the George Washington game were crazy finishes.
They were.
David, they were wins. Were they
Yes.
not? And you can't count them as losses if they won the game, can you?
Well, I mean, I only do that if I don't like a team.
I tell you were shaking your head.
You can't. I mean, I agree with Matt that like they're not impressive wins because they should have both been losses. I agree 100%. But I agree with you, Chad. Like a W is a W. It's a cliche, but it's true.
Well, we've come to it now. The 11 line will complete our at-large bids here. We'll have 6 teams on this line, so let's go ahead and reveal it. These are the last teams that made it in: Syracuse, TCU, Cal, Marquette, Arkansas, Clemson. And just this was the order of the first 4 teams. Cal was the highest rated of those 4, followed by Arkansas, Marquette, and Clemson. I had to flop Arkansas and Marquette for bracketing purposes, but Clemson ended up being the last team in. And let me run through each of you and your thoughts on this line. And David, let me start with you.
Clemson is so bad. There's a lot on this line that I can gag on but get down. I can't even attempt to swallow a team that is 6 games below 500 in league play. I just can't even pick them. I think I ranked them somewhere, but I wouldn't have.
Yeah, they're up to 5 games under 500. They're 4-9 now, 14.
Oh well,
overall.
okay. Then let's. I retract that statement.
But David, let me pull up this profile here, and let's just take a second here. Look at all these. I mean, you've got 5 top 50 wins, including at South Carolina.
At South Carolina, at Wake. I suppose it's not too outrageous. I mean, you could make a case for them if you had to, certainly with their wins. But, geez, I mean, they have so many losses. And none of them individually are really that bad. I think they're all to teams that are either in the tournament or close enough to it. But, you know, had they just gotten 1 or 2 more, I'd be feeling much better about them.
And John T., look, in terms of
what is going on my television right now? This Oregon game.
I'm not watching your television, David. You're watching your television.
Yeah.
John T., in terms of Clemson's losses, though, we got a lot of close ones here too.
A ton. I mean, I think I just see 7 right there against 80 of the best teams in the country by 6 or less. Granted, there are losses, so you have to count them as losses. But if you're going to bring VCU down for having bad wins, I think Clemson gets elevated a little for having close losses. But I agree with David. Like, there's just too many losses, period.
David, are you sure that's Oregon on TV? Because I could have sworn I saw Baylor's highlighter unis on there.
I don't know what it was.
Matt, Syracuse and TCU both avoided the first 4. 2 other teams that are, you know, are these 2 teams going to make it or not? I mean, Syracuse, a lot of losses.
They're not in great shape, but geez, like no one from about Michigan State, I doubt, I think, is in all that great a shape. So we got to fill these here. Like, who did we really? I'd like to see who the first 4 we left out is, and like what kind of case we could make for these other teams. Because I mean, I think I had Texas Tech in my field as my last team in it. Like that's where we basically are right now.
Yeah,
Redbirds.
And actually, before we get there, let me, David, I gotta take a little bit of issue with you here.
Why? Because
you have all season been ripping apart. Everyone wanted to put this Arkansas team in. I gotta make a comment here that among all 5 of us, you had Arkansas rated higher than any of us.
Well, first of all, you said this was an anonymous ballot.
But let me go ahead and Matt's point here. These are our top 4 teams out. And Matt, actually, Texas Tech ended up being our top team out, followed by Salika, your Illinois State team, Wake Forest, and Georgia Tech. A couple other teams that did receive votes here. The only 4 more that got any votes at all: Providence, Tennessee, Indiana, and Georgetown. That's
Indiana.
it. That was the entirety of the teams that got voted. And if you look at that, there's not much there that you're saying is on its way in, is there?
I like some team. I guess I didn't vote for them. Well, I did because I voted for 60. But I actually think I like some teams better than some of the teams that got votes. Like I like Monmouth and better than Indiana.
And actually, I will make this point here that there are 2 teams, UNC Wilmington and Monmouth, that got votes as well. They are going to be out on the 12 line, so they're not on the also considered list.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would rank Middle Tennessee and Monmouth ahead of some of those teams. But getting back to Arkansas and my anonymous ballot, well, they did something last night that they hadn't done all year, and that I didn't think they were capable of doing. So it changed my opinion of them.
Yeah,
quite a bit. 1 is infinitely more than 0.
John T., what are your thoughts on the last few teams that we put in and these top teams out? Is this really an awful looking bubble or what?
It is. I got 2 specific comments. So 1, I feel terrible for Cal. They got to go to the Midwest to play Marquette on a Tuesday, then head to Greenville to play South Carolina on a Friday. That is brutal. And as far as Texas Tech, I would not give up on them just yet. I agree with you that I have no problem with them being out right now. However, they have 5 games left in the next couple of weeks. 4 of them are against teams in the field: West Virginia, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. The 5th is a home game against Texas, which I believe will be the first time ever that they're favored to beat Texas. This team is far from done. I would not give up on them just yet.
Wouldn't Cal Marquette actually be a Wednesday playing game? Because I would think the Tuesday game would actually be for those teams headed to Sacramento.
Yeah, it could be.
Bingo, yeah.
Too. Stalika, I've got to bring this team up here. You, I think, almost single-handedly helped push Illinois State up to the 2nd team out. And I need to bring this up here. I know Titel and I both didn't even rank Illinois State in among our top 50s. Here is the Redbirds profile. And where is there a tournament team here? They have 1 win against a team that's in the field. It was a home win over Wichita State. They have 3 losses to teams that we have not discussed here. Where is it? What are you seeing here that I'm missing? I mean, maybe I'm missing it, but explain it to me.
San Francisco's
I mean, we have to look a little bit just beyond the paper resume itself. I mean, some of their profile numbers are actually going to be similar to what Wichita had last year, at least as far as defensive ratings. Offensive ratings are a little bit behind, but at the same time, I mean, they're still dominating their league along with Wichita, which is something that –
they're tied with Wichita. Dominating would mean that they were 15-0 and Wichita had 3 losses.
They're doing better than other under-the-radar favorites like Wilmington and who was the other? Charleston
Middle.
That's in the Colonial, and Middle, because they did not have a bedwetting like Middle did.
Matt, are you on this Illinois State bandwagon at all?
Not in the field. I think I probably had them as one of my couple of teams out, but not in this field without the auto bid. And realistically, if they lose even one more time, probably to Wichita, it's basically the 1 tournament team they played 3 times. They lost to twice.
Right.
But I think another question we're going to have to ask is if they both end up tied at, I think it's going to be 17-1, who gets the number 1 seed?
It could come down to I don't know what the tiebreakers are.
It's RPI.
If it does come down to RPI, it actually right now would go to Illinois State if you look at went that
Right.
way.
Is it RPI? Like every conference does it different.
But is
the
it-
American flips a coin.
They mentioned it like 20 times during the Illinois-Wichita game and at the Roundhouse. So
Okay.
I want to go ahead and pull up our 12 seeds as well. I'm going to make one more comment here, Dave, that you'll actually will appreciate. I mentioned that the last 4 teams in order were Cal, Arkansas, Marquette, and Clemson. We actually had a team that ranked in between Marquette and Clemson, and that was Middle Tennessee.
Inside the bubble, sort of.
Barely inside the bubble. They do fall down to the 12 line because of the way the first 4 bracketing works, along with Valpo, the Monmouth team that you mentioned, and UNC Wilmington up there.
Yeah.
And
That's a good 12 line.
It's a very powerful 12 line, a very dangerous one. We've actually got a strong 13 line here as well with teams like Texas Arlington, Nevada, Akron, and Vermont, all dangerous teams. And I'll run through the rest of them before I run to any other comments for everyone else. But the 14 line.
I was just going to say, can we go back to 13 for a moment? Because Nevada, I guess Reno's campus is going to be close enough to Sacramento where I wonder, wouldn't they protect UCLA from a team like Nevada just because of mileage?
They're playing Sacramento. Nevada. That's a protection enough.
No, Nevada, Reno's not close enough to Sacramento that with UCLA that it would be a home court disadvantage, in my opinion. You're still over 100 miles, I think. You got Asheville, Belmont, Gulf Coast, and Princeton on the 14 lines. Here's our 15 seeds, including Furman, South Dakota, Bucknell, and Bakersfield, and the 16 seeds to finish it off. Mount St. Mary's, UC Davis, Texas Southern, Weber State, New Orleans, and NC Central over there on the left corner.
New Orleans going to the Elite Eight, if you've been watching Under the Radar.
Bill, David, let me start with you. We've got an entire bracket up now. Any thoughts on the entirety of it?
Ironically, as much as we're holding our nose with the bubble, and I know we do it every year, if everything plays out the way that we hope it does in the conference tournaments, that 12 line is really good. It's like, can we just flip the 11 and the 12?
I think there is chances for teams like Middle Tennessee to move up as these bubble teams keep losing. Matt, do you have any other thoughts on the entirety of the bracket?
Basically, for as much as we think the bubble sucks and that it probably does, I had 40 or 35 of the 36 at-larges, and the one that was in and out, I'm not going to be holding my breath on. So I think we're pretty much consensus for what the bracket kind of should look like.
So Tytel, that means that Matt just won the bracket matrix as to our bracket right now. But,
congratulations, buddy.
Yeah, the bracket matrix of predicting the bracket that predicts the bracket.
Two things that jump out to me. There's always the 12-5 upset, and as much as I want to pick Wilmington over Cincinnati to piss off Stalika, I'm going to have to go with Valpo over Creighton, mostly due to the injury, because Valpo will have the best player in that game in Alec Peters. And if you like offense, please do not tune into West Virginia Princeton, because there's going to be zero offense in that game.
I saw that matchup when I put this together, and I just laughed. That is a great one there, West Virginia Princeton. Great in terms of the pain of watching it.
Right. And again, Baylor being the first one seed ever to lose to New Orleans, who's on their way to the Elite Eight.
Stalika, did you have any thoughts on the whole bracket here?
No, I think John T. tried to piss me off earlier by intimating that VCU would probably beat Xavier in the tournament. I mean, yes, I think Shaka's team did beat the Muskies, and I want to say 2013. Xavier had also beaten VCU when Anthony Grant was coaching them. In fact, I think that was the same year when VCU actually beat Duke during, Greg Paulus's phantom flop in the NCAA tournament that year.
I've got one other comment I'd like to make here. A team we did not discuss among these also considered teams was Providence, and I want to go ahead and pull them up here because I think we kind of maybe they needed a couple seconds here. David, I think this is a team that's moving in the right direction as opposed to the wrong direction, and I actually had them as my very last team in when on my field here. Now they're lacking the road wins, but and they've got a lot of losses. But they, I don't know. When you look at what everyone else is doing, they just came off of wins over Butler and Xavier. That's what I think.
Right, and if you look at their upcoming games, 3 of the 4 are not only winnable. They're games 2 of the 4 certainly are games that they should win. In fact, it's disappointing if they don't. And if they can get one of the 2 other ones, you got to look at them closely. I think he's done a great job coaching this team. They've improved a lot as the season has gone along, and this is a team that lost a lot of its personnel from last year. So I don't think they're going to get there, but yeah, you're right. They're worth mentioning. They do have a chance, and we'll see what happens in their last 4 games here.
I think it's also worth mentioning that losing to both Boston College and DePaul on the road, that can also disqualify you from the Atlantic City 8.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say that one of the reasons I really like to see Providence get is because they have that trifecta, that unholy trinity of losses of St. John's, BC, and DePaul. And if they can make the tournament despite those, that anybody can make the tournament. And as a
Right.
Rutgers fan, I need that. Let me go ahead and pull this down here. Let me run through each of you here. Do we have any other final thoughts for the evening? And Matt, let me start with you.
I'm looking, you see the bottom of the bracket in that, it is going to be a Big East brawl for an all for anywhere from maybe 0 to even 4 spots if things went crazy. I know someone on the Marquette site predicted a crazy thing that had 8 teams at 9-9 or better, with like 2 of the 9-9 being Georgetown and Providence. I think Georgetown definitely gets in at 9-9 in the Big East. Providence is one I had a little more doubt on, but if that crazy scenario happened, maybe you see at least even you'd see 7 Big East teams in, or if the breaks keep falling off Marquette, Seton Hall goes to say 8 and 10, and Providence and Georgetown somehow lose the wrong games, maybe you only see 4 Big East teams in.
All right. Stalika.
I'm going to go with St. John's here. I mean, to allude to what Chad said, had you just beaten Delaware State and Long Island, Brooklyn, and combined that with the rest of your resume, you might actually be a long shot NIT team like I thought that you could be during the preseason. But when you look at who they've beaten in Big East play, Seton Hall, Butler, Providence, among others, they are much improved from last year, and wouldn't surprise me that if Chris Mullen's able to keep this roster intact, they probably could be contending for a legitimate postseason berth next season.
Right. And for those of you that want to see it, coming up in about 5 minutes here, we're going to start our NIT preview show, followed by our CBI and CIT shows.
Yes, all night long.
Titel, any other thoughts?
Well, now that everybody's turned us off, I think that it's mid-February, so of course the hot topic in college basketball is the Ivy League basketball tourney, of course. Princeton pretty much locked in. They're 8-0 with 6 games to play. Harvard and Yale 6-2, looking very good for the number 2 and 3 seeds. Number 4 spot, because they only take the top 4 this year, is wide open. Columbia 4-4 has a 2-game edge over the rest of the conference, while Sucks at 2-6. Penn, Brown, Cornell, and Dartmouth not looking good, but they literally have to start winning games or they're going to be eliminated in February.
Yeah, you thought you might have had a better shot this year with Penn, but they are on a 2-game winning streak. Come on. David.
We are all every year it's the same exercise. We do this year after year after year, and we're complaining about how there's just a lack of credentials and a lack of quality on the bubble. Every year it kind of plays itself out. I think that more teams are going to play their way in than they are out, and that by the end the teams that are in the tournament will have better credentials than what they do now. If nothing else, the conference tournaments kind of force the issue because it forced bubble teams to play each other. And so far, no one's figured out a way for both teams to lose in the same game.
Well, that could happen with some of these games that are coming up.
Yeah.
I think, isn't it Oregon State playing somebody tonight? They're both losing. But on that note, though, on behalf of John Sleek and Matt Zukowski off to my sides, John Titel and David Griggs down below, and down below, all the way down below the podcast, so you can see that final bracket that we just put together. I do want to thank you all for joining us. We'll be back again next week. Thank you.